Hello, well today I'm cutting screw threads and this is for my Sabotier knife. I'll step back a bit. Okay, it's like an old French clog cutters type knife. Paroir is the other name for it. I probably said that wrong. But it's got a nice curved hook on the end here and it needs a hold down. So in one of my earlier films, which was blacksmithing with the alpacas, I actually did forge the hold down. But I now need to put a screw thread on the bottom. So out comes a tap and die set. So here we are. This is the little hook that I forged. So I'm going to put a screw thread on the end of this. I've forged up this eye hook from a piece of 10mm bar, and the actual thread I'm going to put on this will be, I think it's M10? Yes it is, it's an M10. Anyway, to do an M10 I looked up the tables on the internet, and the bar needs to be about 9.68mm. So I've just rather crudely just ground off some of the metal off here, hoping I'm around 9.6mm. It's all a bit imprecise. It frankly doesn't really matter, as long as the bolt holds. I'm not going to worry if it doesn't look perfect. I have a standard tap and die set, and with these it's worth buying reasonable quality ones. So there you are. Let's get going. So hoping I've got this bar at about the right diameter, I'm just going to put a bit of oil on it. It just helps the cutter to work its way through. And I've loaded in a M10 1.5 thread cutter into here. So there it is. If you want to do a tight or a loose thread, you can adjust this screw. So these two screws hold the little disc cutter in, and this one, if you adjust it, it opens or widens that gap and gives you a tight or coarse thread. So anyway, I'm just doing this crudely. I'm just going to leave it on its standard setting. So idea is to try and keep this at a right angle as you enter, and to go in very carefully turning, and hopefully if I've ground it down enough, that will start to cut the thread. So keeping it straight, I'll have to move the camera actually to do this, but that's the idea. You turn it forward a bit, and then to clean the thread out you turn it backwards, go forwards, turn back, and you keep repeating that, and you just blow out bits of swarf that you get there. That's the idea. Just worth me saying also, these dies, you can tell which way to start going into the bar because they're like tapered on the inside very slightly, so it's wider at the front here, narrower at the back. So I actually couldn't put this on this bar from the back, but where it's wider at the front I can. So that's the side you start with. So nice right angle, and just rock it a bit to try and start that thread. Just very gently, I'm just easing that in, trying to keep it straight, fair pressure, and hopefully, being mild steel, it won't be too troublesome. I'm just rocking it back and forwards now and again to clear off the thread. If you feel it's too stiff and it's taking, you know, a lot of pressure, it means something's wrong and your diameter of your bar is probably wrong. But this at the moment is going okay. I may need to grind a bit more metal off in a minute, I suspect, so I probably haven't ground this bar terribly evenly, but we'll see. Okay, I'm going to take this off. We're getting a little thread forming. Very little. I'll just swing the camera around, so hopefully you can just about see a little bit of thread there, just beginning to form. So I'll put a bit more oil on that and I will carry on. So you can wind the die back on, a little bit like putting a nut back on. And I'll keep going forwards. It's the same idea if you are tapping a hole to take a bolt. you have to just go carefully. The other day I was doing one with my son, and we didn't have the hole quite big enough. It was doing an Acme thread, so it was a slightly complicated one. It's for his 3D printer. Anyway, we actually had to in the end re-drill the hole and make it a bit bigger. You're better doing anything like this so the bar is smaller than it needs to be, and if you're tapping, to have the hole a little bit bigger. It will give you a slightly loose fit, which usually doesn't matter, does it? It depends what you're doing, I suppose. Some people will be saying, oh, it does matter, my cylinder head will fall off. But no, it depends what you're doing, obviously. But I don't like to over-stress these taps and dies. They're not bad quality, but they're not, you know, super quality ones. I find if you avoid the really cheap ones and go for something medium range, you usually, if you're lucky, from a reputable make, get something fairly usable. They are pretty good these days. So, just repeating all of that, I'll just bring that off. Got bits of swarf forming here, so I'll just find a bit of rag in a second and just give that a clean and another oil. I'll swing the camera around. So there you are, the screw thread going on quite well. Keep it nicely lubricated. I always, if I get an old sheet or something, I always cut it up into rag. It's really useful for the workshop, both for wood, metal, leather. So you need nice bits of cotton rag. Old shirts, old jeans, they all get reused as rag. So that's going to work quite well. I'll be amazed if I've got this bar ground sufficiently evenly down its length, but time will tell. Now I'm getting quite a bit of swarf now collecting in my die, so I think in a minute I will undo it and I'll blow through it just to get rid of it. It's cutting quite well though. In the little full channels, so there are the cutting points, 4 of them, and the swarf collects in those like round drilled out circles. So it's best just to blow that through every now and again and keep it nice and clean. So a little bit more oil on my cutting area and I will carry on. Take your time, it works fine. I mean, that's working as a screw thread quite nicely, so there's not too much wrong with that. I've made a bar a little bit thinner at this point, and as you can probably tell, it's going through a bit faster. Something I tend to hold, I always have, my dad used to do it actually, he had a jam jar full of miscellaneous nuts and bolts that he used to pull off of things, and I've always done the same. So if I'm disassembling some broken item like an old typewriter or I don't know, lawnmower, I always tend to have my little jar of bolts, nuts and bolts, and they're jolly useful. Anyway, of course, along comes metric and you suddenly find you don't have as many. So what I've done recently, I do collect a few metric nuts when I find them on things, but I've actually bought a couple of boxes of the little metric nuts. So these sorts of things, we get them in a little pack, and it's just very convenient because if you need something, so here I need an M10 1.5, you just reach in, and I can test this out now, and that's going fine. Well, sort of fine. It's a little bit tight there, I'm going to have to go back over that in a minute, but it is working quite well. But I'm nearly there. It's just going to run this up and down a couple of times, but I think that's working quite well. So I've put about 1.25 inches of stud on there, and I'll just try one of these nuts. Yeah, that's going fine. It's pretty good actually. It's probably a tad loose if one's being really fussy about things, but what I will do when I come to bolt this, I'll put a couple of bolts on and lock the bolts against each other, and that will be fine. So the idea with this one is I'll be using it to secure that big Sabotier knife, and it's going on my spoon mule. And I've got another knife, a nice blade, and a blacksmith fitting down this end. So this is like the small cutter. So this will be doing spoons, and this will be for the large cutter at the other end. And then I've got this insertable head which goes in here, and a bit more about that in another film. So here's the finished bolt going through on my spoon mule to the hook at the top. There we are, that's my knife hooked in. Anyway, hope you enjoyed seeing that one about cutting screw threads, and thanks very much for watching. Goodbye.